From a young age, I've loved trams, trains, ships, and with my uncle being in the Australian Navy, I think that only reinforced my love for this type of subject. Is that engineering side of it. I think that really fascinates me. After my first visit to Melbourne, I really fell in love with them. They're that inner city beast that are just marvellous to paint. Quite complex, but super interesting. Let's see how I go. Nothing like getting a decent start, and even though these are hugely technically looking difficult subjects and intricate, great trick is to break it down into rectangles. Some of the windows are sort of vertical rectangles. That big long side of the tram is good to get that line in first. But notice how it's really just a rectangle on the front, big long rectangle on the sides. One of the trickier parts is to get the balance of where the doors, and so that we don't have things out of scale. This is the older type of tram. They're used more for tourist routes and just doing like the circuit of Melbourne. So it's one of my favourite little tricks. I may have mentioned it before, but it's really marvellous way just to get some value on, just to get rid of the whiteboard. And so I deliberately grabbed a little bit of yellow ochre there, almost like a watercolourist would do it, even though the paint is definitely going to go on thicker. This was kind of around about the time where I was still thinking, you know what, this is going good, getting some of those big shapes in and getting the big darks in. Actually, the windows down the side of the tram was one of the trickier values to get, because some windows are open, some are closed. So I decided to go more for the mid-tone value, sort of like a bluey grey. It was with a little bit of alizarin and yellow ochre, because there's some windows open, so that's going to be a darker value, but I thought that will be something that I'll approach and figure out those exact shapes and values later. So it seemed to work really well. I was slightly unsure of what I was going to do with that, because boy, there's some windows there, and that was a little sort of concerning. Here I come with the wiping back. A great test for your board, if you've either got a board too well sealed, is that I wouldn't be able to wipe this back. When it's too well sealed, it'll slip off too easy. Sorry, I got that back to front. And when it's not sealed well enough, the surface will be way too porous, and you'll really struggle to take paint off. So that's why I like to sort of think of it as the Goldilocks thickness. So it's not too slippery, not too porous, and that can be a little bit of trial and error. If anything, I probably do prefer that fraction more porous than the opposite, because sometimes the danger is that if it is not porous enough, the paint won't tack off fast enough, won't set up for me for the second go. So this is an entire block in. I haven't really looked for, except for maybe that little bit of light down that front edge in that little bit of yellow where the door entrance is. I think it's always nice to get a few little accents of detail, or the details, as I like to more think of it as. So I'm not really going for detail, but I'm putting in the overriding details. So it's the value of the top part of the yellow of the tram. You can see how powerful that yellow is. It's cadmium yellow. I almost didn't even notice that the little, not sure what it is, it's just I suppose it's a little way that people can see what number the tram is. I actually have got it up a little too high there at this stage. I wasn't really watching how I was measuring there. That's why, even if you're not a great one at drawing, measuring is always the key, and that's actually sometimes the best trick, is to line things up where lines will intersect and come back. One thing I did notice that I almost did it on purpose was I made it a little shorter. I was a little worried that it was going to be this big long, almost like a big tube almost with that rounded top. So I deliberately shortened it up. This is my favourite little device for doing these, even though I'll roughen some of these up a little later with the bigger brush just to break them up. But it's nothing like getting the ones closest to the focal point in the strongest and then diminishing the detail and strength of the line. So this was actually just an old insert, a liner, that was the smallest little insert that I would normally use, but unfortunately I cut it the wrong size. But it was one of those great mistakes that I've used it. Now you can see how old it is. It's about 15 years old, because I was nearly going to break it down, because it's about 22 inches by about 8 or 10 inches wide, and I thought, that's some good insert that I can reuse, recut. But I'm glad I kept it. This was quite a big moment in the painting. It was where I was bringing in the light, the horizontal plane of light. There is a little bit of yellow ochre, and sometimes I may put just a tiny little bit of cadmium red. And I think with this type of scene, and not so much a tram, but a fairly detailed scene, it could be a house with lots of windows, or some sort of building, or let's say the windows on like a ferry, or where there's a lot of repetitious shapes, is that we get them in tight, strong, in near the focal point. So you can see how this is all related and leading the eye back to that vertical, just about that one where the line ended, that vertical there. That's kind of my epicenter, where I want everyone to look at. And these are always good fun. They normally have a windscreen wiper, because this will be the window that the driver looks out of. And doing the light was quite interesting, because I knew that so long as I got the shadow value accurate, most of it should fall into place, because it's really that illuminated light up against the shadow, that shadow that I'm working on there. And it's quite easy to go a little too dark and too warm. Well, that one proved to be quite the challenge. I almost gave up on it 2 or 3 times, to be brutally honest. That's how far painting can push you sometimes, and I think that's when really that concentration, determination really comes through. Not only was it technically difficult, but there was a lot of brushwork and colour nuance that was required. Hope you enjoyed it. All the best.